All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Mindful Investor Podcast Show. I'm your host, Steve Rozenberg, and I am proud to represent Mynd Property Management. I'm head of investor education for them. And we're doing this as well. We're recording this and we're also doing it live on Facebook. So we kind of like to give people time to jump on and they can understand what's going on. The reason we even have this show is that there's a lot of information out there. Look, there's a lot of podcast shows, there's a lot of gurus, there's a lot of other people that do stuff, but there's not a lot of people that tie in investing, creating wealth, and doing it day after day, month after month, year after year, to actually see that wealth. And I think it's something that I personally have not seen it. And I think it's something that's missing in the industry, because just because you buy a deal doesn't mean you're going to make the money on the deal for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And having the right business model, hearing from people that have been doing it, hearing other strategies about how you can do it, I think is very, very important. And at the Mindful Investor Show and Mynd Property Management, what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate you so that you realize there's not a one size fits all. There never is, there never has been. Sometimes it's whoever talks the loudest on the internet and social media is what actually gets the attention. And there's other things that are sleeper ideas that most people don't know about, have never heard of, but can be a great source of making money, a great source of building wealth. And that's kind of what we're doing on this show, is we're giving you all the different perspectives, not just the good, but the bad. I talk to a lot of people that have a lot of challenges. And one of the things that I've learned is that everybody has a different way of doing it, number one. And number two, there is no right or wrong way. And you will fail. Chances are, statistically, you will have challenges and you will learn from those challenges, and you can champion them and learn them as lessons, or you can take them and they can be the demise of your whole business model because you don't learn the lesson. So today we have Erik Preston, who is with Habitat ADU. And I'm going to let Erik tell his story, but what an ADU is, an auxiliary dwelling unit. And those are ways to basically add a revenue stream by increasing the value of the property. And I'm probably butchering this, so I'll let Erik explain, but it's a way to basically add value in a revenue stream to an already existing piece of property. So Erik, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Steve. I'm excited to be here. Basically, what's going on is that starting January 1st of this year, California passed a series of sweeping new legislation that took a previously niche product, ADUs, which stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit, and made it mainstream. So the state of California came in and said, you can add an ADU or two ADUs to any property, effectively taking a single family home and turning it into a triplex, or taking a 4-unit property, making it a sixplex, and made it pervasive. So what was previously incredibly difficult to build is now almost a constitutional right in California to be able to add units to your property. And as such, over the course of this year, we've seen a ton of excitement and interest from investors. So I'm here to sort of evangelize this investment opportunity, talk a little bit about how it works. Then a bit about myself personally.
Yeah, first let's start. I'd like to hear a little bit about you. How do you even get into this kind of niche type business, and like, what's your background? And then also after that, can you kind of go into more of an explanation of ADU? Because I got the definition wrong. I thought it was auxiliary, and it's not. So yeah, let's hear a little bit about you.
With my personal background, and then a little bit about Habitat, and then we'll jump into the ADUs. But yeah, overall, very excited to help evangelize and educate all the listeners about this investment opportunity. So I'm from the Bay Area in California originally. My career has been effectively a series of different prop tech startups in Silicon Valley. Most recently, I was the head of new product operations at Opendoor, which is going public this month. A lot of listeners might be familiar with Opendoor if Opendoor is operational in those markets, basically a product or service that made it very easy to buy or sell homes online. I left in March and was extremely excited about joining a new early stage startup. One of the founders of Opendoor is also one of the founders of Habitat. And what got me particularly excited about Habitat is that it has regulatory tailwinds. So often when we're looking at new innovative real estate solutions, they're playing in a legal or regulatory gray area. And the ADU space is clearly backed by legislators. And every month it feels like there are new laws coming out or new lending guidelines coming out that make ADUs more accessible and more pervasive. So I was super excited to join something early stage that the state was really behind.
Mhm.
And I also think it does a tremendous amount of community and social good, which had me very excited as well. We're adding housing into communities that need it without disrupting the fabric of those communities, but adding much needed density to areas where affordable housing has been an issue, while still providing great returns for investors.
So it's almost like you're squeezing more juice out of the orange, kind of, right? I mean, you've already got the footprint of the house,
Yeah, exactly.
and so you're just squeezing a little bit more.
Let's
Is
talk
that is
about what
that
it. Let's talk about what an ADU is, because they come
okay?
in many different shapes and sizes. So ADUs stand for accessory dwelling units. Previously, they've had many other names: second units, in-law flats, granny flats, cottage homes, carriage homes, garden homes, garage conversion homes, basement units. So it's actually a pretty broad category. And the state of California has taken a stab at defining it broadly to be inclusive of all of these different types of sort of secondary units on a property. So the simplest way to think about an ADU is I own a single family home. That is a 1-unit property. It's zoned single family. And somewhere on the property, I'm going to add a new livable, permitted, accessible unit. And it's going to effectively turn the property into a duplex where before I had room for one family and one income stream, I now have 2 different units that are both rentable and livable for 2 families with 2 income streams. It doesn't actually technically turn the property into a duplex. It's adding a special type of unit called an accessory unit that's defined effectively by the permitting process one goes through in the state of California. Now, it's not just California, by the way. Portland is probably the leader in the United States in terms of its penetration rate for ADUs. Seattle, not too far behind. And in the greater North American continent, actually Vancouver is blowing people away in ADU development. 30% of all single family homes in Vancouver have an accessory unit, which is pretty incredible. California is at way less than 1% penetration right now. So I think we will see an explosion of growth and development in this space, people adding second units to their properties or third units and fourth units, with the new legislative tailwinds that have made this so easy. I want to follow up on this point, talking about different types and permutations of the ADUs that we see. So if I have a garage that's detached from my property and I convert that to a livable unit with its own entrance, egress, bathroom, kitchen, and living and sleeping space, that's called a garage conversion ADU. You can do the same thing, say, with a basement and sort of get that up to code and permitted very quickly and easily now, adding those same features to turn it into an ADU. Typically, you see them bucketed into 2 groups: attached or conversion ADUs. That's where a second unit is added within the existing sort of livable envelope of an existing property, or a detached ADU, which is a new structure built in like a backyard or a side yard that's completely standalone and separate from the primary residence.
Now, I have a question. Are you seeing, is the reason that this is happening, more, we'll say more juice getting squeezed out of the orange of a footprint of a property, is this more prevalent in markets that are already tough to, like, they're landlocked, they can't grow anymore, so they're trying to kind of build on top of the other? Is this the solution for the San Franciscos, Seattles, LAs of the world? And are you seeing this like across the country, or only areas that are severely landlocked?
Well, it's certainly a product that is more helpful in more urban markets. It doesn't have to necessarily be, downtown city center. We see a ton of ADU development in the suburbs where
Okay.
there's a demand for more density and more housing, but still a lot of space, right? If I have a 6,000 square foot lot with a single family home, there's plenty of room in my backyard to add an 800 square foot 2-bedroom unit, still have a backyard, create a totally separate egress and entrance for that second unit, and still charge really high rents on that property. But I really do feel like you're doing a lot of social and community good as well. It's very environmentally sustainable. A lot of these new units coming up are very green. You're reducing commute times. You're keeping families closer to their place of work. You're adding home affordability and more units into areas that need it. And for an individual home buyer, you're making that acquisition of a new property more affordable as well by giving them an additional income stream to help support the finance on the property. So ton of social and community goods. It's less valuable in more rural areas, right? The further out you go, there's less of a need for additional housing and additional density. But in the suburban areas and of course in the urban areas, to be able to add livable units just helps create more home affordability and more desirable locales for folks to live that are closer to their place of work.
So let me ask you this, and I don't know the strict the California codes, but let's say, for example, in Texas, when you go from 4 units to 5 units, do you start getting into the multifamily legal aspect? Does that come into play in California?
Yeah,
like once you get a certain amount?
Legal aspect as much as it's a lending aspect, right? That's the 4 to 5 units is really where you see this distinction between residential lending and commercial lending. So it's actually an incredible question, Steve, because first of all, it doesn't happen that often, right? The vast majority of ADU developments are single family homes adding
1 to 2
new units. So they're just going from 1 to 3. But multifamily investors, like I'd say in the last 2 months, have realized, oh my gosh, there are some tremendous changes that just happened. And all of the things that I used to just try to avoid because they were so burdensome with adding units or doing renovations, with the permitting, with the entitlements that were so impossible and so difficult to go through, are now incredibly straightforward and easy. And they're saying, well, I have a 6-unit property, I can add 2 units. The cap rates are through the roof.
Right.
This is going to be phenomenal. So obviously going from 1 to 2 or going from 6 to 8 keeps you in the same bucket of financing. We have a few customers now. A customer named sort of ironically Preston in Santa Cruz he has a 4-unit property. He's actually adding 3 units, 2 detached ADUs, and then doing a garage conversion as well. So he'll be adding 3 units to a 4-unit property. And we're actively working with lenders to try to figure out how they want to finance the thing. It's really confusing and it's a very innovative and emerging space. And I think why there's such an investment opportunity, right? When this is all figured out and laid out very cleanly and neatly, the prices on all of these units are going to jump through the roof as everyone realizes how easy it is to add the units and accrue additional income. But right now, everything's mispriced because there are still some unknowns to figure out that look like there's a straight line path, but aren't super fleshed out yet.
Well,
But
I
don't know.
Yeah. So, as you were talking, I was thinking in my mind, what happens when, and again, I'm just thinking, okay, he's got these 7 units. Now, does he have a parking problem? Like, is there so many parking spots he needs to have? And all of a sudden now the HOA comes back and says, wait a second, you may have the permits, but this doesn't. And again, I'm maybe it's going down some rabbit tail.
Incredible questions. And I think why investors are just starting to catch on now, right? There are all these barriers and problems that come when you add second units.
Yeah.
From both a functionality and a livability standpoint, as well as from a regulatory standpoint, right? Like, sure, I got the building permits, but what about the planning permits? Or I've got the planning permits, but I don't have room for parking anymore. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what is the set of legislation that California passed, because it effectively removed all of these problems. And
yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear
that local governments and cities used to put in place and said, these are no longer valid. We're coming over the top. State law is superseding. We want to encourage more housing being built. And there's been an epidemic failure at the state or at the city and local level to provide a general plan that allows for these units to get built. So series of laws that were passed just went active this year. The first thing is that effectively all single family zoning in the entire state of California was ended. Every single unit has the right to add both an ADU and a junior ADU, no matter what. You need to have the space to add the ADU, and historically, cities made that very difficult. They would have floor area coverage requirements or maximum unit sizes, all sorts of burdens that were impossible for individual owners to clear to get ADUs built. The state has said you are no longer allowed as a local city to place any restrictions on things like unit size or floor area ratio. So they've standardized it at the state level and said, if you're building a 1-bedroom, you can build up to 800 square feet, no matter what. If you're building a 2-bedroom, you can build up to 1,000 square feet, no matter what. The only requirements in terms of size are that it must fit within the space of your lot with 4-foot setbacks from the rear and side property lines. So no matter what your local zoning or planning department says, if you can fit an ADU that's 800 or 1,000 square feet within those 4-foot setbacks, you're allowed to build the ADU, and you come over the top of the local zoning. Parking was mentioned. So 2 things that are good news for investors around parking. If you are demolishing, removing, replacing, or converting a garage, a carport, or any type of covered parking structure to build an ADU, you do not have to replace that parking. Similarly, if you are adding a new unit and the city used to say that new unit must have parking, as long as you're within a half mile of some sort of public transit, accessory units have 0 parking requirements that the city is allowed to impose. Maybe the single biggest thing the state has done is said, these are now ministerial reviews rather than discretionary reviews to get your permits approved. So you effectively skip the entire planning department and just get rubber stamped at the building department. And all ADU permits must be approved in 60 days or less. So
wow.
From the time you submit your completed permit packet, local cities are required by state law to just check a few boxes and rubber stamp them in less than 60 days. And that's changed the paradigm of submitting and planning and getting these new units approved.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I was speaking at an event. My friend Jay Martin had an event in San Francisco. It's probably about 6 months ago. And a gentleman there that was speaking, I was talking to him, and he was talking about ADUs. And he specialized in a very niche area, Los Gatos. And he said, I said, oh, we started talking, and what's your superpower and blah, blah, blah. And he said, I do ADUs. And I said, okay, that's cool. And I said, what's the model that you have? And he says, 400 square feet. And I said, what do you mean? He said, all I do is 400 square feet, not a foot more, not a foot less. So as I started digging in and asking questions, he said, anything over 400 square feet, it requires a permit. And so he said, I know my numbers, exactly what it takes to get 400 square feet, what it does to the value of the property, so much per square feet, what I can rent it for. And he says, I know my margins. I know exactly what I need. So that's all he looks for, is houses that he can add the 400 square feet, because he didn't have to pull the permit, which maybe it sounds like now you don't need to.
It sounds like you were talking to this gentleman in 2018, 2019. Or was it?
Yeah, it was about a year ago, I believe. Yeah. It was a little while ago.
Instead of 400 square feet, it's 800 or 1,000 square feet. And that really it doesn't allow you to completely bypass the permitting process, but say like 80 or 90% of the permitting process you can bypass. And you can do these in a variety of different ways, right? You can custom stick build the most luxury 799 square foot ADU that you want. I mean, we've got, our founder is doing an investment project in Santa Rosa. The primary residence is like 600 square feet, and he's putting in a 1,200 square foot super custom tricked out ADU. The alternative is also possible, right? You can go down to 500 square feet, fit it into a very tight area, sort of like a studio, do it prefab and get the whole project done in under 200K, which is very affordable in California.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, let me ask you this. And again, I'm the train of thought as we were talking before about, getting the loans. I'm thinking, let's say I go to sell this property and now I have an ADU on it, right? What kind of lending do I have to get for the buyer? If I'm a buyer, does that affect the lending that I have to get and the type of insurance and all that?
I think in the single family home space, most of ththese financing issues have been solved already. In the multifamily space, there's probably still some things that are like working their way through the system. But let's say I have a single family home and I've added a detached ADU. Maybe I did a garage conversion, or I did a prefab 800 square foot unit. It's actually still considered, in lenders' eyes, a single family home. And really in the city's eyes, it's still considered a single family home as well. And it's just got this specially designated accessory unit, which is different than a duplex. So your buyer is going to use the same loan that they've been using their whole lives, right? Like if you're looking for just a regular consumer single family home buyer, Fannie and Freddie love ADUs. They have a special set of rules that designate very clearly how to treat ADUs. They have instructions for appraisers on what they need to do to help add additional value to the single family home because of the presence of an ADU. They actually Fannie and Freddie both in the last month actually just updated their guidelines to make it even easier and simpler for appraisers to appraise these single family homes with accessory units and add additional value to the property because of the presence of that second unit, which provides incredible optionality, right? You can think of it as a buyer as just additional square footage, but it's also a rentable second unit, right? You can live in the primary and rent the ADU, have your mortgage paid for. So that additional optionality and space that has so many different uses is very appealing to a lot of buyers. So you just use your plain old Fannie Mae mortgage.
So let me ask you this. Now, I'd like to get into some tactical type questions here for you, because you've obviously done this and you see the value. So let's say I'm an investor and I have a single family rental, and I'm looking at the backyard and I'm going, you know what? I could add another, maybe two to that thing. How do I go about doing this? And more specifically, how do I explain to the resident that they had a single family house and now they're basically going to be part of a duplex or triplex?
Sure. So let's just use the most straightforward baseline case, which is like a single family home that's rented out to a tenant. So what the state of California says is if you want to go through this streamlined, expedited ministerial review process that takes less than 60 days to get your ADUs approved, you're going to be allowed to build one junior ADU, which is a less than 500 square foot unit that's within the existing envelope of the home. These junior ADUs are not particularly appealing for investors to me because the city can still require owner occupancy for those junior ADUs to be rented. So I would just sort of like put those to the side for now. But we can also build on all single family homes one detached ADU. And one of the new state laws is that these cities can no longer require any owner occupancy anywhere on the property to be able to rent both the detached ADU and the single family home. So what do I do tactically to figure out what I can build? Just as a starting point, we probably should start thinking one detached ADU, because that's how I get into this very simple ministerial review process. So the first thing I can do as a homeowner or investor is just go look at my backyard and get a rough idea of how much space I have, right? You can actually go on Google Earth and there's a little measure distance feature that allows you to get rough dimensions for your backyard. Generally, I think you're looking for something that's at least 30 feet by about 50 feet of available space. And the reason for that is that you're going to have a fire setback from the primary residence of about 7 to 10 feet for safety. I also think it's just good for tenants to give them some distance and some space. And then you're going to want to go 4-foot setback from the rear and side property lines. And what's left in the middle there is your buildable envelope. No matter what, if it's a 1-bedroom, you're going to be able to build up to 800 square feet. And if it's a 2-bedroom, 1,000 square feet, potentially more. And then you want to get a feel for the general character of the backyard. Is it flat, right? Flat is going to be much easier to build. Foundation is going to keep your costs down. One thing to always be aware of if you're building prefab, specifically if you're building modular or manufactured housing, which is oftentimes much more affordable and you're sort of shipping that and installing that in the backyard, power lines can be very prohibitive for that installation process if a crane is required. So we always like to ask homeowners to take a look for major power lines in the back or front of the property. Those can make the installation of a prefab unit much more difficult or impossible. The other thing you want to get a feel for is site prep required, right? Are there sheds that need demolition? Are there trees that need removal? All of those things are possible to do. It just may add cost to your project. Another good initial step that a homeowner investor can take is contact or just sort of Google around on their local city's ADU policies. We mentioned that the state of California has come in over the top and sort of implemented standardized guidelines statewide, but a lot of cities actually really encourage ADUs. They view it as the solution to the housing crisis. that can be implemented without disrupting the neighborhood. So they have websites promoting ADUs, providing how-to guides that are free for homeowners or investors. There's a lot of great information you can get there around specifically what the quick and easy permitting process is, what maybe pre-approved vendors for that city are, what costs the investor might consider. And once you've done that, I mean, it's time to start getting proposals and getting quotes and assessments. So there are a lot of different types of ADUs out there. You can stick build with an architect, an engineer, go through the GC bid process and kind of manage that process yourself. There are prefab companies like Habitat that do either modular or manufactured housing. What we see in California is that those are really two things: a lot less expensive because you're getting geographic arbitrage on the construction costs, building offsite in a factory where costs are lower and more controlled. And then the second thing you get is a lot more simplicity and control over the process, right? You have less things to wrangle and manage. It's really simple, convenient, and turnkey to do a sort of a prefab ADU. But an investor should compare and contrast, get a few different quotes, make sure you're comparing apples to apples on every line item of costs, including things like foundation, trenching for utilities, finishes, permits, etc. Get a feel for the different design options that are out there, and pull the trigger. That's the main thing. Is there's a 5-year window in California right now that grandfathers in any ADUs permitted during this period. So that they can never be required to have owner occupancy in order to rent both units. And that 5-year period will end in about 4.5 years. And at that time, it's not clear if California will renew those policies or not. So now is really the time to build and add sustainable units to your community and increase the heck out of your returns and cap rates on your properties.
So let's talk about returns. Like if, obviously it could be a expensive endeavor, right? To go ahead and do this and
it's a big ticket item, no doubt.
Right. So what is the ROI? What kind of returns should I expect from doing this? Now I know that's a very tough question, I get, but how much should I be looking to add to say this makes sense for me to do this or it does not?
I mean, I definitely think that any listener needs to do a deeper evaluation of their specific property, because there are so many factors, from the permitting fees that might be implemented in your local area, to the cost of labor and construction, to your method of design and build, to what the rents are in your area. One thing I will say at Habitat is we're happy to do very free, very quick virtual assessments of any properties or prospective properties that customers are looking to buy, to let you know, yes, this is a feasible project and here's what we'd expect roughly on cost. We can do that very quickly and easily up front. But just like to do sort of an example case, right? So what we've seen in California is that ADUs have the best returns in more expensive areas. And the reason for that is that the rents are higher, but the costs of construction are generally constant, especially if you're building prefab offsite in a factory somewhere in a less expensive area where you've got sort of assembly line, machine precision, building these homes at a lower cost. So the fundamental structure of why the returns are so good, and let's just take a base case, is that if I already own a single family home in an expensive high rent area, I've already paid for the land. I already own the land and it's effectively and essentially free. There's maybe some very small opportunity cost in creating a smaller backyard for tenants, which might mean you have to reduce your rents very slightly for a primary residence, like on some minute level, but effectively free land that you're not getting any revenue or income from today. And it's just sitting there in a high rent area. And if we can go offsite elsewhere and buy a unit that's low cost and then ship it and install it in a high rent area on land we already own, the returns are off the charts. So I'll just give sort of an example from a project we're doing in Oakland. Single family home, as I described, investor already owns the land. This is a property that they already have in their portfolio. Huge backyard, maybe a very small premium on the rents for the primary as a result, but plenty of space to maintain a large backyard and add a second unit. Rents are high in this area. I underwrote the rents for a 3-bedroom apartment in the area at 3,500. So we'll very conservatively say the rents will be 3,000 in this part of Oakland. To buy a 3-bedroom condo in this area would easily be $600, $700, $800,000. We can build a prefab ADU for $250,000, ship it and
Wow.
install it. So exact same size of unit, exact same rental income stream at $3,000 a month conservatively. Cost to acquire or build or construct, instead of $600,000, $250,000. So as you'd imagine, when your construction costs are so low, but your rents stay the same, your returns are going to be very high. So for that project, cap rate was 10.68, which is, double or maybe getting closer to triple of what you'd see in the Bay Area typically. If you can get any sort of financing for the project, which is actually fairly straightforward if you have some existing equity to borrow against.
Right.
We've seen people lever these 100%. Cash on cash returns 16, 17, 18% very reasonably. Some cash on cash returns, quite frankly, infinite, because zero cash was required to be put into the project. People levered 110%. So in the Bay Area, those returns are off the charts. If I had a steady flow of deals like that, I'd be raising my hand to invest all day.
Yeah, all day long. So that makes sense. Now, so what does Habitat do? Like, why would I use you guys? What do you facilitate for people?
Yeah. Well, first thing I want to say is our mission is to help solve the California affordable housing crisis. So we do have a lot of customers that come to us and we take a look at the project and say, there's actually a competitor out there that might be a better fit for X or Y reason. Maybe there's giant power lines we just can't install. So we're happy to recommend, a stick builder and an architect. I really do just want to encourage people to check out multiple vendors and explore all their options to find the best solution for them. In a lot of cases, Habitat can be the best fit. We have a somewhat unique approach to the space, which is that we're building to HUD code. We're doing manufactured home ADUs. There's some trade-offs there. But the big benefit is that it's substantially lower cost. Even just coming right off the factory line, a fairly identical unit to a state and local code modular home, we're going to be 30, 40, 50K less expensive. And then on top of that, the ecosystem of vendors and subcontractors in the space, generally less expensive as well. So compared to stick built, we should be $300,000, $400,000 less expensive for an 800 square foot detached ADU. Compared to like another prefab modular company, we're probably still 50 or 100K less expensive all in. So that's the first thing to get across about Habitat. We strive to incentivize accessory dwelling unit construction by being the lowest possible cost provider and driving costs down as low as possible for the developer, the investor, the customer. The second thing to know about us is that we are turnkey. We're a really great fit for someone that doesn't want to deal with the hassle and uncertainty of wrangling a complex construction and development project. We handle everything from A to Z. We do your permits for you. We have in-house permitting experts that deal with the local cities to get these things ministerially approved. We have sort of constrained, pre-architected, pre-engineered design options, so customer doesn't have to hire an architect. We handle the foundation, the utilities connections and trenching, the unit itself, the delivery, the install, the finishes, and all of our units come with a 7-year warranty. So for the investor out there that's looking for the highest returns as a result of the lowest possible cost and wants a super convenient, simple process, we may be a good fit. Everything we do is detached, single-story ADUs, a little bit more flexible than the gentleman you met who only did 400 square feet. We have 9 different floor plans ranging from about 430 up to 1,200 square feet. But if you're looking to do a garage conversion or a basement conversion or like an attached ADU, that's not us. We don't do that, but we're happy to recommend someone that you can speak with who does specialize in that space.
Great. Wow. It's good information. And I think it's, like you said, it's definitely it's for a bigger challenge that we have. It's not just for you guys to, make some money doing construction. So I like the fact that you guys are doing something to solve a problem out there. And it's not just a California problem. It's all over the country.
I wanted to flag for sort of the national audience as well. I've talked a lot about California because that's where we're based and where we operate. It's also where the entire state has come over the top and said, all of you local cities and counties that used to make building ADUs impossible, it's possible now. We're coming over the top on you. But Portland, huge ADU population. Seattle, very pro ADU. And we're starting to see this happen more and more in suburban and urban areas across the country. North Carolina has gotten very ADU friendly. Parts of Florida, Atlanta, parts of Texas are seeing similar movements. Usually you see the regulators and the legislation lead, and then the investors, the developers, and the homeowners follow as it becomes less prohibitive and far more expedited to build ADUs across the country.
Great. Well, Erik, how do they get a hold of you if they want to find you and talk with you more in depth about this?
Yeah, my email personally is Erik, E-R-I-K, habitatadu.com. I field calls from interested investors, developers, everyday mom and pop homeowners, realtors, agents all the time. So again, that's Erik, E-R-I-K, at habitatadu.com. You can also go to our website where we have a ton of good information about local laws, different models we have, the general process to build an ADU, and that's habitatadu.com.
Great. And do you guys have any like Facebook groups or social media stuff that you do, or is it mostly the website and then emailing you?
We certainly have a Facebook page, but most of the good information that I would want if I, as an investor would be on the website. We do have sort of like a monthly webinar series as well for people that are looking to stay a little bit more arm's length, but still get more information. I do a lot of these as well. So, I was on a Realtor Association webinar just yesterday. So you may see me around in other places as well. Great.
Well, Erik, look, I appreciate you coming on. I love the fact that you guys are doing something and you're basically keeping the footprint of real estate the same, but you're adding more value, which is, that's what it's all about. You're increasing profit margins. Yeah.
Everyone out there who owns a 10-unit property, effectively the state of California has said, you now own a 12-unit property. Or if you own a 6-unit, it's now an 8-unit property. It's just a matter of going through the very simplified process of getting some stamps, building some ADUs quickly and easily, and adding 2 more rental income streams to your multifamily property.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Well, Erik, again, thank you for being on today. I appreciate it. Again, for those of you that want to find out more information, it's habitatadu.com. As for myself and Mynd Property Management, I want to thank everyone for watching today. If you want to know more about managing your asset, we're in over 19 investable markets nationwide, much of where Erik was talking about, and then many, many more. Go to our website at mynd.co. That's MYND.co. There you can find all the information, video content, educational platforms, everything you need. We can also help you find a property as well if you're looking to get help in that realm. So on behalf of Erik, myself, and Mynd Property Management, thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next week on The Mindful Investor. Bye-bye.